I'm not about changing people's minds. It's not really my goal. What I do want to do is to create the space where it's possible for alternative viewpoints to come in, right? So if I'm going to attack you and call you stupid and you're ignorant, you don't know anything, you're watching that dumb news station that tells all lies, whatever it is that you want to use as your narrative, all you're doing is, one, you are further entrenching them in their beliefs.
Right.
You're setting fire to any possibility of them seeing the merits of your position. And three, and maybe worst of all,
what if the key to transformation lies in shifting your perspective? Hi, I'm Dr. Payal Beri. Welcome to Reframing Perspectives. Every conversation here is about one thing: how empathy changes the way we lead, connect, and create impact. Each episode, we get to explore deep, authentic conversations designed to expand your mindset. Whether you're looking to transform your leadership, deepen your relationships within your circle, your community, and friends, or gain clarity in your own personal growth, each episode will inspire you to see things differently and take action. If you're ready to challenge your thinking and embrace transformation, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. I'm so excited to have you listen to this episode that I get to interview Shola Richards. He's just an exceptional human. He is just really on a mission to spread more kindness in a deeply divided world. He's spoken on such incredible stages. He's even testified in front of the House of Representatives on Capitol Hill. But when you hear him talk, you hear just such groundedness. And there's going to be some trigger moments in there. So I just want to warn you on that. Hard things that he's gone through, depression and bullying, that led him to flipping his life around and spreading kindness and empathy. And think about people who just have gone through so much, and they used all of that emotion to just spread a lot of empathy and kindness and understanding. That's what Shola is doing. It's navigating a divisive world with civility. And he really just dives into what that looks like for us on a day-to-day basis, what that looks like in our working world or professional world, but just even for our own selves. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I really enjoyed interviewing him. Welcome, Shola.
what's up, Pyle? We did it, man.
I know, finally.
We did it.
I'm so excited to talk to you. Like, first of all, your energy, everything. And obviously, whenever we talk, we can just go on forever.
If anyone... So funny. Like, we're supposed to be scheduled like 45 minutes ago to start. We just started riffing forever. Just like, we need to get started. Like, no, you get started. No, you get started. We just like, it's hilarious. And here we are.
Here we are. You know, I found you maybe like 6 months ago or so. And it was like, well, a little bit longer than that. But then I kind of finally got the confidence to be like, let me message Shola and just see.
She slid into my DMs.
slid into the LinkedIn DMs. But your work just spoke to me so much. You know, your work on civility and kindness and empathy, especially in the world that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
And I'm just so curious, and I want to share this. Like, you know, one of the biggest things is just about, obviously, when we get into this work, we don't get into this work just purely out of like rare coincidence. No. There's always intention behind why this matters so much.
Yeah.
What was it for you? Well, I know what it was for you, but like, what was it for you that really made this become more than just a, like, I'm just going to do this, but like a mission?
Yeah. So for me, when I was younger, I grew up being bullied a lot. I had a speech impediment. I had jacked up teeth. I was an easy target for the bullies. And I remember growing up when I was being bullied by other kids, I was like, God, like, why can't people be kinder to each other? Why can't people be nicer to each other? And I've always been what's called an HSP, a highly sensitive person. So I feel things very, very deeply. And so my whole life. And then as I started getting older and started dealing with more incivility, more unkindness, it started to hurt me more and hurt me more. And then about 20 years ago, I just worked in this really freakishly toxic work environment. It was awful. And just people were just so mean and just terrible, terrible human beings that work there, if I can be honest. And after dealing with this for like around 18 months, I ended up falling into a very deep depression. Not like euphemistically speaking, like, oh, it was so sad, but I wasn't sad. Clinically depressed. And one morning when I was going to this job 20 years ago, and I'm like, yo, I'm done. And it wasn't saying that I was done with the job. I decided that I was going to take my own life. And it's funny because I share this story often, but every time I share it, it's like there's that book like Body Keeps the Score. Like you always
Yeah.
feel it as you start talking about it because it can just go back to that moment when I'm sitting in my car and what I was doing. So I live in Los Angeles, not too far from where we're recording from. And while driving down the 405 freeway, I attempted to drive my car off the overpass in an attempt to make it look like an accident.
Mm.
And the guardrail held, thankfully, and I'm still here. But that put me on this path of like research. Like, what? I asked so many questions like, wait, first of all, thank God I'm not dead. Let's go there. But then I'm like, I almost ended my life over how people were treating me at work.
Yeah.
I was like, am I the only one dealing with this? I started digging into stuff and learned about a term called workplace bullying, which I didn't know was a thing.
Yeah.
And I dove into that and knew so many people are dealing with this in the workplace. And I'm like, why isn't someone doing something about this? This is awful. And then one of my buddies like, hey man, you're somebody. Why don't you do something about it? I'm like, me? Well, I have no talent, no skill. Why would I? I'm the wrong guy. And it's kind of this weird like hero's journey thing where I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to figure it out. One thing I can kind of do well is write. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go and write. I started a blog and started sharing my thoughts around positivity and kindness and empathy and such. And people were like, I like how you think. And then 2 turned to 4 and 4 turned to 8 and the followers would build. And it ended up turning to a book deal. And then 3 books later and still hopefully traveling the world, trying to get people to make their better choices around how we treat each other. And here we are.
That's do you believe that the experiences that you had with being bullied to that led you to, it's like, I'm gonna say that I'm gonna butcher the saying, but it's like 1,000
Paper cuts?
paper cuts, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it like led you to that place, right? Eventually, where it's like if it was just if you didn't get bullied as a kid
Mhm.
and you didn't have that, and you had the workplace bullying only, but you didn't have, would it have led to the same experience,
That's such
right?
an interesting question. I never thought about that before. I think it could be argued that it might not have been the same, right?
Yeah.
Because I've had a whole lifetime, pretty much as long as I can remember, being bullied and treated poorly.
Right.
And I think by the time I got to like my late 20s, early 30s, where my suicide attempt happened, I was like, my whole life has been this. I can't do another 30 years of this. I'm
Right.
done.
That's the only narrative that you had
Exactly.
experienced.
Yeah.
And it's the only narrative of like, and why does it keep happening to people who are highly sensitive, right?
hmm
It's like, what is it about that feels like, let me even make them more intensely feel?
Because I think part of doing it, if you are a bully, is you bully because you enjoy the reaction that you get from the
Right.
bullying, right?
Right.
So usually the strong, silent types aren't really bullying targets per se
Right.
because you're not going to get what you want from them.
Right.
If you can get me to see my lips start quivering in a meeting or fighting back tears or
Mm-hmm.
fumbling over my words or find a
Mm-hmm.
comeback or something, it's like, yeah, that's one. That's the guy.
And then it's being a man and the definition of that, and
hmm
then seeing someone who is that quiver and cry. It's like, ooh, wait a second. Now you're not even what we're supposed to be defining as.
Oh, yeah. Throw in the fact that I'm a black man on top of
Right.
that, right? It's like,
Right.
wow. I mean, I got called all sorts of crazy names. Like, oh, look at this guy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he looks like he's gonna cry again. Oh,
Yeah.
it was just, it was so awful.
Yeah.
And because I'm sensitive and I feel things,
Mm-hmm.
I think it made me an easier target.
For
But when
sure.
you take all this stuff from childhood and pile that on to teenage years and college, and then you get to the working world, I'm like, whoa, if this is what I'm up against for decades to come, I'm opting out. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
going to end my life, which is horrifying because you think about anyone that has suicidal ideation. I'm not going to generalize. I'm going to speak for myself, though. There's an absence of hope.
Yeah.
Hope that things can get better, hopes that things could change, hope that I'll eventually become strong enough to be able to deal with that. I didn't have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the easy decision was be like, you know what? I don't want to experience this pain anymore. So I'm going to do what I can to end it. And unfortunately, I did so in a way that was so extreme that could have changed the entire course of my life.
Right.
And now I want to dedicate my life to make sure no one goes on the path that I went down.
Yeah. I mean, and that's such an incredible path. Like, because people feel that every single day,
Mhm.
right? And what I find also just so wild is that what you went through and what took you down that path and what a bully is actually experiencing.
Yeah, good point.
There is so much in common there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it manifests is just so different.
It is. You know, it's funny. Might get this metaphor jacked up. But when you think about like origin stories of like superheroes and supervillains, right?
Yeah.
It's like usually both of them had something horrific happen to them that set them on this path, right? So superheroes, something horrific happens is like, I'm going to make sure that no one has to deal with what I dealt with in the past.
Right.
Supervillains, something awful that happens to them, like, I want to make sure that everyone feels the same pain I'm feeling. So it's like
they have empathy, right. But it's like, let me have you feel what I felt.
It's like this mutated form of empathy is like reverse empathy.
Right, exactly. Like, you need to feel me.
You need to feel everything that I'm feeling in the depths of my soul. And it's like, so to your point, it is that bullies in some sense, they really do struggle. And I think that comes from a place of fear, hurt people,
100%.
Right. And so you see folks that are deeply damaged and they go about maladaptive ways to get their needs met. If I don't feel like I am valid or I'm being seen, one thing I can do to feel seen is to get in your face or to call you a name or to make you cry because now I'm not insignificant. What I just did engendered a response in you. Mm-hmm. So I did something that actually worked. So now I'm proving my validity as a human because I was able to do something that had an impact on you.
Right.
Regardless if it's positive or good, that's all it is, right? So when I think about this and that bullies act in fear, I'm not saying this like we need to go hug all the bullies. I'm about like,
like we
you gotta stay away.
That boundary, right?
Yeah, set that boundary. I'm like, I don't need you in my life. Mm-hmm. But it does help to have a little empathy to understand. I wonder why she's acting that way.
Exactly.
Right? I wonder what would make her do that.
And I think that like when we're in this like divisive place in this world, right?
We're there. There's a divisiveness going on.
I don't know. I heard of it.
I know, it's so weird. I don't hear any of it.
But it's happening all over the world.
It is.
Right? And there's this like intensity that you feel. It's very palpable. And so there's disagreements that happen. People are seeing things from a different perspective. And something that just gets to me is that there is such a strong stance of, well, this is my opinion, right? Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. Mm-hmm. But when their opinions are based, like where they're not actually recognizing that your opinion is based on this defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. Your opinion is based not in facts, or your opinion is actually a response to this emotional reaction you're having. It's like everyone is in this space right now of needing to be right.
Yeah.
And not actually wanting to listen. How do you see that? Like when you're, out there doing your talks and you're connecting with people, leaders in the workplaces, and you talk a lot about that in the discourse that we have.
Yeah.
How do you resolve that?
It's funny. I think a lot of people in this day and age, they seek validation more than they seek information, right?
Oh, that's so good.
Unfortunately, though, because people like, hey, I have an opinion, I can spout it off, whether it's a well-baked one or well thought out. My thing is, I'm not about changing people's minds. It's not really my goal. What I do want to do is to create the space where it's possible for alternative viewpoints to come in, right? So if I'm going to attack you and call you stupid and you're ignorant, you don't know anything, you're watching that dumb news station that tells all lies, whatever it is that you want to use as your narrative, all you're doing is, one, you are further entrenching them in their beliefs.
Right.
You're setting fire to any possibility of them seeing the merits of your position. And three, and maybe worst of all, you're contributing to the toxic discourse that we're trying to avoid.
Right.
So by creating the space of like, hey, listen, I was interested about your opinion. Tell me how you came to that. Tell me how many understand where that came from.
Yeah.
And then like, how do you know that's true? Asking questions to make them go deeper than, well, the 8 p.m. anchor on my favorite news station says so. Well, that's not good enough. Like, tell me more. Like, how do you said X, tell me why you know that. But by having this response where I'm not attacking you, like, that's so interesting, Payal. Like, you said that. I just want to learn more about how you came to that conclusion. What ends up happening is now that person is like, wow, you, being me in this argument, has totally different ideological stance than I do. But he's not attacking me. He's not calling me names. He's not saying I'm stupid. We just had a discussion that was actually pretty interesting.
Right.
Now, for a brief moment, my mind is more open to the idea that all people who think like me aren't these weirdos or hateful people.
Right. Hyper emotional and, people who make assumptions.
Exactly. But we have to create that space.
Yeah.
And people on both sides of the equation are so funny. I'm like, even though I'm the civility guy, there's a lot of people who are like pissed at me. It's like, they're like, you're telling me that I gotta go and hug the racists and the homophobes and transphobes. Like,
Right.
who in the hell is saying that?
No
I
one's
would
saying
never
that.
say
Yeah,
that.
right.
Never say that. It's like, no, of course not.
Yeah.
Like, the idea is identify these people and separate from yourself from them without apology. No problem to do that. My argument still stands that those deeply toxic, hateful people are far less representative of society than we had originally believed.
Yeah.
There's some people who are reasonable,
Yeah.
who are open to debate, who voted differently than you, but want to be like, hey, I'm happy to sit across the table with you and talk about, like, let's chop it up. This is what I did, and this is why I thought this candidate was the right person.
Right.
Well, I disagree because I think this person is. And then we can talk about that respectfully. This is the only way that we can get our functioning society back on track, because it's not functioning right now.
So I have a theory.
I'm here for it.
So I feel that one of the reasons why there is such intensity in how people then connect with each other, talk or not talk, and have this like battle ready to go is because we're living in a 24-hour news cycle. We are constantly on social media. You're exposed to whether it's political theater, whether it's, people that are just yelling and screaming on the different social media platforms across. And now with AI being introduced, right, there's a lot of things that are out there that are not necessarily always true.
Yep.
And so what's happened is it's like we now become like download, and now it needs to be like outputted somewhere, right? So we're not actually being able to have like a sensible conversation because we're just outputting all of this content that's just being consumed. And before we've even had a moment to ourselves to make sense of it. So it's like we're consuming all this stuff because, again, people don't know how to sit still anymore. People don't know. When people are like, oh, I need to take a little bit of a breather from work, what do? They're scrolling.
Yeah.
So you're actually never giving your brain or your nervous system.
That's right.
Even a split second for it to just breathe and rest and chill the F out.
That's right. Yeah.
And so then it just becomes this like, I need to make sense of this and I'm just going to like throw it out there.
I could not co-sign that more strongly. And I think that's why I have a meditation practice, because it forces me to not get to the place of like constant inputs. It's overflowing. So you think about it, like wake up in the morning, people grab their phone, start surfing. All right, okay, cool. And then you listen to your favorite podcast or your Sirius XM on, you listen to your political radio, turn on the news, and it's constant. Then you go on social media and God knows what's going to be on there. And you're getting filled with all this stuff. And of course, you're getting the algorithm smart enough, excuse me, to make sure that you're getting more of what it is that you believe, right? Whether it's accurate or true is not, we don't know, but we know it's more of what you believe. You get to a point where it's just like, I'm so full of all this, I have to just spread it out and just offload it. And there's no time to have like conscious reflection and contemplation.
Yeah.
And just a pause from the constant deluge of information. So my answer to this is like, and it's funny because I'm taking my own advice that I talked about in my book. Leading up to the election, I found myself completely off track. Yeah. And it's funny because here was, and I wrote so specifically about this in my book, found myself like this, like watching every single battleground state poll and all this type of stuff and losing it. And it's funny, after the election, which is odd, I felt a sense of like peace.
Yes.
Because it was a place of like, okay, I can now go to a place of acceptance. Here we are. I now am clear-eyed about the work that I need to do to create a more civil world. I'm going to pull back from all these inputs that are coming to my brain. I'm going to dial back social media. I'm going to certainly dial back news watching and just go to a place of what can I do in this moment to create positive change? Yeah. And that gives me a place of peace because you're absolutely right. If everyone is just constantly just like, this guy said this guy said that, and they're fighting just taking all this information that they're hearing and spreading it to other people, we create this world where we don't see each other. We don't pause and hear each other. We're just waiting for our turn to talk.
Yeah.
And the ability for me with meditation causes me to pull back, be more present, know that my feelings don't necessarily have to be who I am. I can see my feelings and be an observer and be like, wow, what she just did really pissed me off. Why am I so mad about that?
Yeah.
Let me think about that for a second. Let me sit with that for a minute. Instead of being like, and maybe all reactive. It's been very helpful for me.
Yeah. I mean, meditation, definitely, right? Like, and just being able to center with that is huge, but not everyone is able to practice that.
I know.
It's really hard. And in the moment, right? So all of these things, and we talk about it, even me, right? Like in the moment, sometimes it's an exact moment where you actually like push all of those healthy coping strategies to the side. So how do you keep yourself on track?
Yeah, I'll give you something a little bit more practical for people who don't like meditation.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I love from Viktor Frankl. It says, and I want to make sure I get this right, in between stimulus and response, there's a space. Within that space lies the power to choose our response. And within our response lies our growth and our freedom. Meaning that we'll be stimulated, triggered perhaps by something. In that moment, you can, hold on, let me get in my meditative space. Like that's not going to happen, right? So instead it's like, so someone says something, I need just that minute of pausing. Even what I do is I found the power of diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing as they call it, to be critical because it shuts off that autonomic fight or flight response that happens. So it's like an interruption. So if you're breathing deeply and your diaphragm is expanding, your nervous system's like, oh, well, clearly you're not in danger or else you wouldn't be breathing like that.
Right.
So let me calm you down a little bit.
Yeah.
So that breath is something that I do in the moment, and it's a reminder. And I have a mantra. I keep it in mind. I say, calm is strong. Calm is strong. You have to have something that you can lean on in the moment, especially if you're going into a conversation that you know is going to be challenging. We talked about some personal situation that you're dealing with. It's like, if you're going to those situations, then you know, like beforehand, like, I got to be armed, man. I know this is going to happen. That deep breath, I gotta be ready to do it in a way that's going to interrupt that flow of like, I need to attack her. I need to attack them.
Yeah.
Because if not, then we're just gonna be at the whim of our lizard brain impulses, and that never works out.
Hi, so I'm pausing the episode for a quick moment and for a quick favor. If you haven't already, if you could just click subscribe, leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, it would be really helpful. The only way we can know to make sure that we provide the right type of podcast episodes, the right type of guests, and to make sure that we're delivering the type of content that you actually want to hear, it's through your reviews and through your support. Thanks. And now back to the episode.
I do think down the road, if anyone does want to try meditation, people are like, oh, I need to have 45 minutes free. Just screw that. You need like a minute, just 60 seconds.
Exactly.
Just close your eyes. And the whole thing is like, but my mind keeps drifting. That's how this works.
Yeah.
So like the whole point is like, I work out, at least I try to. And like the idea is like, each time you take your thought and bring it back, that's a rep.
Yeah.
So instead of you being,
I love that.
instead of you being like, oh my God, I screwed up. No, that's good. So the more time you do that, the more reps you have, the stronger it's going to be, the easier it's going to be for you to stay longer focusing on your breath and being in the moment. Let's make it easier when you get triggered.
One of the things that I guess I wonder is people who are doing this work, right? And trying to spread more civility, trying to do more work around empathy and all of this. We're constantly around some of those taking in and absorbing all of people's pains, right?
Oh my God.
You're constantly hearing it, I'm sure, like when you're out there. And of course, your book, which is brilliant, and I read it in like literally 2 days.
Oh, wow. I wish it took that long to write it.
But, there's a lot of change makers out there that are just, even myself including, like I was mentioning before we started talking, is like just deep burnout, So how do you help people realize that like the work that we're doing with kindness and the work that we're doing in this civility world is the marathon?
Oh my gosh. So many things on this. So the big thing for me, boundaries.
Yeah.
So the hard part about me, the hard thing that I struggle with is that I have this desire to want to help everyone, right? So when people reach out to me or slide into my DMs, like, oh my gosh, I've been dealing with this. I'm dealing with depression and I'm dealing with a toxic boss, or I'm in a position where I don't know what to do. My relationship with my son has been estranged because of our political differences, and I'm so sad.
Right.
And you get this constant deluge of messages and pain and energy. All I want to do is just like help them all.
Yeah.
But I can't because there's only certain hours of the day. And then you get messages like I'll send a message at like 7 a.m. and then like 3 p.m. later, like, I thought you cared about people. I thought you were about kindness. You're a fraud. You don't answer your emails. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I have to be really, really intentional about my energy and understanding that I can't be all things for all people. And I have to decide what's going to be the best way for me to maximize my impact, right? So is it responding one by one to these messages, or using my platform on social media, or when I get on stage, or when I'm writing, to hopefully hit a larger swath of people?
Yeah.
It sucks. I think the hard part of people who do this feeling work, empathy, civility, kindness, any of those things that really, truly require us to feel energy, we're going to be drained.
Yeah.
So the need to renew, the need to step away, the need to be like, no, I can't do that. No, I'm not available. No, this is not something that's going to fit for me, is critical for a guy like me who's a people pleaser.
Right.
That skill was like completely dormant until I had to wake it up and be like, I can't say yes to this.
Right.
I can't say yes to all these things.
Yeah.
I have to say no.
And I think that this is something that the changemaker world, or just people in general, struggle with, is that you do a little bit and then you feel like it's never doing enough.
No.
Right. And we live in this world, especially I think that the way that our, like, just the culture in the US is with hustle culture and corporate culture, is that you're always supposed to be striving for more.
Yep.
So being content with, and I actually have friends that are like this, where they're just like, I feel ashamed that I'm actually content. Like, it's wild to think that someone is just kind of like, I feel nervous to talk about the fact that, like, I'm content. I don't want to climb the ladder. I don't want to do all those things. And even now, if we think about, the way that Gen Z gets like talked about, right? It's like, oh, they don't want to put in the work. And I mean, there's some issues with that, but like,
Sure.
but there is that thing of like, yeah, they're not willing to trade their mental health, and they're not willing to trade, life outside of work for that ambition, right? And I think even when we use the word ambition, it can be talked about in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that there is that place where people feel ashamed and feel like I'm not doing enough, or, I should sound like I want to be more successful, or that, the fact that I'm content with having a more simpler life, as if it means that I'm not smart enough, right? And I think that there is that, like, I know I go through that a lot of like, I could be doing this or I could be doing that, right? And it's like, which life path do you literally want to take? And I think there's a lot of struggle around that.
There is. I'm. It's funny. I promised to dive into that, but you said something so important that I have to address.
Yeah.
When you said that you're being content, and people,
Yeah.
you struggle with saying that.
Yeah.
I need to understand that more.
Yeah. So like I have a friend who, she's phenomenal. She is like the kindest, sweetest person in the world. And she's generally not driven by, I need to be at the top of my corporate ladder.
Mm-hmm.
She's incredibly intelligent, but she values being able to spend time with her family and friends. She is, she makes a great amount of money. She's good. She's financially set. And so she's like, I don't need more. I'm good with what I have. And, and so she focuses on that. But because of, people who are surrounded with, and then she also wants to have a partner who also is like not making work their only priority.
Yep. And
it feels like, it's like, oh, that's not the way to, you're not going to meet someone who's going to, people are going to be more driven. People are going to be more, what you're asking for is unrealistic, right? Or things like that. And so there can be, and I've had a couple friends who are like in that space. And it's interesting because, I know I'm a very ambitious person, and I'm very driven about like, I want to like do these crazy big impact things.
Yes, you do. I'm very familiar. Very familiar.
But it's just that, and I always say this, in our South Asian culture, I feel like there's A lot of times you have like our, parents, friends who will compare you to others, right?
Mhm.
And will be like, well, look at what they're doing. And like, what are you? And I always come back with saying, like, like, I'm so happy for that person and what they're doing because it works for them.
Yeah.
And I don't want that for me, but I can be happy for them because they found what works for them.
Mhm.
In the same way, I have like my brother and like my friends who are generally so happy for me, but they would never want to do what I do.
I get it.
And so, and that's what I always share back with people who get dumbfounded with like, why don't you want to follow the same path as this person? Why don't you want to do XYZ, right? It's just like, why can't we just be happy for someone else to have exactly what they want instead of thinking of it as it doesn't match the rest of the world?
Oh my gosh. We could go on forever about that one. I just feel like that's something that I strive towards is to be content. And I don't
Yeah.
want to follow anyone else's path.
Right.
Oh, this speaker does this or this author does that.
Yeah.
I just want to do my own thing. I just want
Right.
to be me. I'm not
Mhm.
really good at being anyone else besides me.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because to that point, I tried so hard, Pyle, to move around and figure out how to like navigate this world. If I do this in this
Mhm.
way, maybe these folks will like me. Oh no, now these folks don't like me. So let me change this way. And it was this constant dance where no one liked me, including myself. I did not like who I was. So I'm like, I want to be content. And I'm more content now than ever
Yeah.
because I'm like, I get to talk about what matters to me, creating a kinder world, creating more civility,
Yeah.
irrespective of your political beliefs or what country of origin or
Yeah.
race or religion, we can still do this. And that
Right.
allows me to be like, gosh, I get to be more of who I am, which
Yeah.
I think people hopefully feel.
I think people can get scared of that too, though. Because when you're so comfortable with yourself and someone else isn't,
Mm,
they feel that. And that comes out as whether it's bullying or
yeah.
whether it's needing to compete with or wanting to reject you.
Yeah.
Right. And that happens a lot in our culture now. It's like this need to reject somebody because you do not believe in the way that my reality is.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
And, again, if we take back to like technology, as great as technology is, we live in our own algorithmic bubbles.
Yes, we do.
And so the pro of that is like, great, you want to see something, the algorithm gets it, like, fine, here, I'm going to feed you that. But now you're only being fed that,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, even with living in this very globally dependent world that we're in, we still somehow create our own little bubbles.
Mm.
And then it means rejecting another reality instead of like what you're saying is get curious.
That's the hugest thing is if we can find a way to be curious. To that point, though, I think I found that once I was dealing with people with different opinions and stuff like that that were coming at me, when I wasn't sure of who I was, it did affect me more.
Yeah.
And that's when my lip would start quivering, my eyes would start tearing up. Now that I'm confident about who I am and more self-assured, I still get attacked all the time. I was
Yeah.
sharing with you before this whole
Yeah.
thing, and just a more recent attack that happened a few minutes ago. It's not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe.
Yeah.
I'm like, but I'm confident in who I am.
Yeah.
So I don't need to worry about shifting my whole personality.
Yeah.
My core beliefs around civility, kindness, empathy, love, all
Mhm.
the togetherness, connection, all those things remain true. I think when you're not really locked into what your true north is, it's harder for you to repel some of the attacks that are coming your way. I know that as you do this work, as I do this work, it's only going to continue to get harder.
Yeah.
So the more we're entrenched in who we are and what our true core values are, the easier it'll be for us to keep pushing forward.
How do you, when you're doing these talks at these companies and, at conferences or wherever, and people are coming up to you and they're very obviously resistant to your message,
Yeah.
and resistant to that like, oh, you're living in an idealistic world.
Mm-hmm.
You're living in a world that doesn't really exist. Like, that's not what the reality is when you're in the workplace and you have to like encounter this stuff. What is your, response to that?
I'll say, thankfully, that's usually rare because now I make a point of addressing that from stage.
Mm.
So it's like, hey, I want to make sure that there's no barriers here. So you understand, excuse me, how realistic it is to do this. Of course, you're going to deal with toxic people. Of course, you're going to deal with bullies and sociopathic gaslighters and people that just behave in ways that are not cool. However, let's talk about how we can address this. I don't want to create this panacea, this fake world where like, all you do is smile and they're going to understand how sweet you are. You're just going to be like, who wants to, no one's going to believe that. They would never hire me to be on stage. So I go in and start talking about some of the harder challenges that you may be facing so they understand like, all right, this guy does understand. Because the difference between me, maybe, and others is I've been in a toxic work environment before. So I'm not coming with my MBA and my higher degrees. If I learned this from a textbook and this is how you deal with cultures that aren't positive. I'm talking from like in the trenches, like as a survival mode, like how I had to get through this. So my message comes off like that. I will say though, that I will run into people afterwards who may be like, you know what? Like it's kind of the opposite. Like I don't believe like being kind is good. You know, sometimes like as one guy is like, I believe that fear is an amazing weapon to get people to do what you need to do. Even using the word weapon is wild, right? It's like fear is a great weapon because like sometimes you just got to kick people in the ass, man.
Yeah.
And like, so I was like, so how's that working for you though?
Yeah.
Like, do you understand? Like, if if you have a fluorescent light in your office, we've all had it before, it's blinking, right? And so it's super annoying. There's a couple things you can do. One, you can go and get a ladder and unscrew the bulb and then get another one and put it in and you're good. Second option is to get a hammer and smash it, right? And just smash it and then both options are going to make sure the light stops blinking, right? Yeah. But only one of those options is going to make sure that the light comes back on again. Yeah. So the idea, if I'm going to go and just smash everything, if your only tool is a hammer, then everything's going to look like a nail. My thing is like, let's stop with the hammer idea for a minute and try something else. So fear is something that's only going to get bodies. It will never get hearts and minds. And it's like using like candy corns and like Pez for energy. Like it's like, it's dead. Like, let's be more sustainable. Let's talk about protein and things that are going to be useful. Kindness, trust, respect. You know, like scaring people is only going to get the minimum amount of effort. So I do run into those people. Thankfully, there are very few. And if these folks do have access to like, I don't know, 360-degree evaluations, they get the feedback of like, whoa. Yeah. This is how people feel about me? Right. Because I'll tell you, Payal, I've been doing this work for, gosh, like 15 years now. I have never run into a workplace bully who's ever admitted to being one.
Of course not.
Because it lacks the self-awareness to be able to be like, you know what, I am a workplace bully. Yeah, sure am. Yeah. They have all these justifications like, yeah, I mean, I'm doing it for the patients. I'm doing it for the clients. I'm doing it for the students. But are you though? Yeah. Are you?
It's so interesting you use that. Like, it's like, gosh, like to use the word weapon and fear, it's like, and not be able to register even what that means, you know, like they're seeing it as like this like thing of like, wow, like this is how movement happens. And they're right? Like fear is a definite knee-jerk reaction response that you get from people. It's an emotional response you get. It's very active. And so is empathy and kindness.
Yes, it is.
But what you get, you know, and it's interesting, even in, you know, this past political stuff that happened, it's like they were comparing it as one was running off of fear and one wasn't. And I actually don't agree with that. I think both were running off of fear.
They were.
And one was fear of like what's literally going to happen in this world. And the other one was scaring people for what could happen if you vote that way.
Exactly.
Right? And so I think that if we go back to like, for example, Obama's, that one was actually on hope. Like that one was, and that's where you saw the difference of that positivity that happened. Yep. And, you know, I like to talk about it from a place of if you activate, like you said, like from fear versus you activate from empathy, is that you'll get a response, but one is going to turn into absolute fatigue, you know, and the state of the world that we're in now. And mental discourse, right? Decision fatigue. Yep. Relationships being severed. Burnout, right? People losing faith in humanity. Oh, yeah. People losing faith in like the government, in like just leaders in general. And the other one is more of like getting us to come together. And, you know, it's a longer route though.
Oh my gosh, it's a much longer route. But that's the thing though. It's like every journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, right? Yeah. So if we get granular, there's a quote that from Civil Unity that I love. It's like, in every encounter, we're either giving life or we drain it.
Mm.
There's no neutral exchange. So if we could get super granular around what type of actions we can take to get closer, like using fear, effective, yes, but you're now draining life from the person instead of giving them life. So when I think about empathy in the moment, because you're right, I think fear is super effective.
Mm-hmm.
It works. I mean, well,
That's
both
why
campaigns
advertisers use it.
Yeah.
You know, media uses it.
You think about like, I mean, political ads that are on,
Oh, yeah.
right? I mean, my God, they're trying to scare the hell out of you.
Right.
And it motivates people to be like, I don't want that to happen to me or my
Right.
son or my daughter or my wife or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do whatever I need to. But I also think like if we can tap into the opposite of fear, which is love. And sorry if this sounds like a Hallmark movie, but like, it's like
We need it
we
right
still
now.
don't we though? Because I mean, it's like the idea of just being like, you know what? I can see your humanity. So fear does something really powerful in people. When I'm scared, I'm afraid of fear at its most basic form is anticipation of pain. I'm afraid that something's going to hurt me. So I don't want to be hurt. So because I'm scared, I not only am I like afraid of you, I hate you. So that's the next step, right? Because I hate how you're making me feel. So if I can totally dehumanize you, I've created this thing like I don't want someone who doesn't look like me, pray like me, love like me in my neighborhood, because you're something that's going to affect my way of life and my kids' way of life and how I go about my day. And I don't want that in my life. So now I don't just fear you, I hate you. But in order for us to get past that, if we could find a way to be like, hey, we're close, we're talking, you can't hate people from close up.
Yeah.
So it's harder for me to have those feelings of hate if I'm having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
If I know, oh, you voted for that candidate and I voted for the other candidate, but you seem like a nice person. Like, wow. I wouldn't think that if I'm keyboard warrioring through my screen and I see you only as like a username.
Right.
But if I can see you face to face, I want to challenge more people to get in the same proximity with people who you may think are different from you, because you can't hate people from close up. It's very hard.
And everyone's kind of like, I think that we get so caught up in hating on each other versus, and that is, I also see that as a distraction from what is the root issue that you're trying to solve for, right? And that's happened a lot now where it's like, we're so, to your earlier point that you were talking about, is that people so badly just want to be validated.
Yep.
They're not necessarily looking for information or anything like that. And then there's some people who just want to be right, you know?
There's that.
And again, all of that is coming from such deep woundedness and from a like isolation. We have like a whole loneliness epidemic that's happening, and it's just looking at that as, how are we then able to look at each other, ask questions that are kind, and if you don't have the capacity to do it, just remove yourself for a little bit.
Seriously.
It's okay that you don't, I also think, like, for example, myself, I only listen to news once a week.
That's good.
Because it's just, the news cycle is just like these micro updates.
Yeah.
And it's like, just give it to me once a week.
And, I'm now at a point, because when I fell off the wagon in the week leading up to the election, and I was like consuming myself with it, and I realized, oh my gosh, it's like having a relapse where like I was totally sober, and then I'm like drinking like whiskey like straight from the bottle before I go to bed each night. My thing is, the advice I had in Civil Unity is that I do now is I just go to my favorite news websites and just scan headlines.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I feel inspired, I'll click on an article, but I'm no longer bathing in primetime cable news, just trying to like, it was wild because I feel so much better now. And like, and I found myself, that's what addictions will do. Like, I need to know what's going on. Has something changed? What happened with this poll, with this state?
Yeah.
And now that the election is over, it's like, cool.
Yeah.
Now I can move on and like, and use my energy on things that are truly not just matters for others, but for myself. Yeah. And now I have energy to do that. We talk about burnout being an issue in this work. The amount of energy that is sucked from you, right? Literally sucked from you as you're watching the news and on social media and all these different things. What energy do you have to do the work that matters? That's really where we have our impact. So I'm so much more mindful of that now. And I'm trying to get as many people as possible to feel the same way about focusing on the work that truly matters to them as well.
How are you as you're moving forward? You know, you've got this incredible book, Civil Unity. Like
Woo-woo.
this book is honestly,
Hmm.
it really is. Like it's what I really loved about this. And I remember I texted you
I
like this
do.
long,
I
could have been
loved
a
it.
chapter. But what I love about the way that you talk about kindness, civil unity, all of this, discourse and our narratives and what leads us to like connecting or not connecting, you share it in a way that feels very digestible.
Good.
You share it in a way where it's, to your point, it's not this based off of like these theories. You use a lot of facts, you a lot of like data to back it, obviously, but it's something where it feels like I can take this, I can like literally open like a page up and it's going to be like, okay, oh my God, of course, I put it to cable news. But being easily influenced not to care. But you literally can show people like, here's one thing you can do, right? And I
Yes.
think that that's one of the other issues is that there's so much of I've got to do, it's like that all or nothing,
Hmm.
right? It's like I've got to do all of these things. And again, it goes back to this like hyper productive, hyper effective like life that we have. It's like, dude, just start with one thing.
Start with one thing. If someone was like horribly overweight, right, and they're trying to lose some weight, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I have so much weight to lose.
Right.
What's the point of even trying? Let me go take 3 Big Macs to the face for dinner tonight." Like that's
Right.
not like the
Yeah.
idea. So instead,
Right.
it's like, you know what? I'm gonna do a little bit of something. There's
Yeah.
a parable that I'm gonna jack up, but it's about this story about like a starfish, right?
Yeah.
And this little girl, I think it was, but it doesn't matter. There's like this whole beach full of starfish, and she kept grabbing the starfish and like throwing them back into the ocean. And her dad presumably is like, "You can't you can't make a difference for all these starfish. Give me a break." And the little girl's like, "Well, I made a difference for this one," and she threw it back in.
Mm.
So it's like the idea
Yeah.
that you have to do everything is what paralyzes us.
Yeah.
One conversation where I talk to someone who doesn't vote like me and we have 10 minutes together where you don't see me as some total demonized, hateful
Mm-hmm.
person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, that's weird because I just talked to this person and he's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought all y'all were crazy,
Right.
but this guy's cool. I
Yeah.
like him. That's something because then I open up another mind to be like, hey, they're not all like that because I know that guy Shola, he's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But the more that we can find a way to not
Yeah.
to disagree without disrespect, that small act is how we build this wave and this movement. But what we're doing is we see the divide so wide, it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
The transatlantic slave trade, the idea that that would ever end, this was going on for centuries, and the
Right.
South was making so much money from this horrific institution that if someone said, you know what, one day this is going to be gone, no one would have believed it.
Yeah.
But here we are. And now we look back on that, thankfully, of like, that was horrific. I can't
Right.
believe we ever, even it was a thing that we did to human beings.
Yeah.
My hope is that when we see the divide now, like, oh, what's the point? Well, that's like the metaphor of like, what's the point of showering? We're only gonna get dirty again, right? It's like, what? Well, no kidding. So we still got to do something.
Right.
So my thing is like, don't get overwhelmed by the amount of work that it's going to take. Anyone that's had big change, whether it's quitting smoking or getting a college degree later in life or losing weight or getting out of debt, whatever it is, they all started from one place.
Yeah.
This place of, I think I can do it. But it's little actions cascading on more action till you see some change that's meaningful. That's the only way to do this. And that's the only way. And that's the reason why I made this book. And I love that you use the word digestible. That's exactly what I'm going for. You can see the action and be like, I can do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, oh, I don't know where to start. You're going to read this book and be like, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And if we do these things together, we
Yeah.
can literally change the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Shola, so much for being here, for having this conversation. I know we could talk for hours.
Oh my God, yeah. This is the thing.
It's our whole
That's
series.
all we do is just, it's crazy how much we talk about
But
this stuff.
it's so important that, that one step, if there's one step that you could share with everyone right now that you think that if they're like, well, I don't even know where to start, what would that one step be?
I'll just keep it really simple. Just be kinder than you are comfortable being. So kindness means like seeing another person's humanity, not just the basic niceness stuff where it's like please and thank you, but like really taking a minute to be empathetic, to listen. And when you think you've reached your capacity, push more. It's like doing that last rep when you're working out. Don't stop with where you're comfortable. Push a little farther so you can really increase those kindness muscles and hopefully change the world in the process.
Ah, that's amazing. I'm going to try to do that.
Same.
Thank you so much for being here. This is amazing.
Thanks,
I'm
Payal.
so excited. And everyone, Civil Unity, you need to get this book. Like, it's powerful. It's beautiful. It's, use it in your workplace, use it at home, use it for your life. Like, it really is something that can be just a kind way of looking at the world.
Thank you, Payal. Appreciate you.
Yeah. I really hope that you enjoy this episode. And I just have one favor to ask you. If you could just make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and review, it's going to help us tremendously to make sure that we reach as many people as possible that you think should be listening to our episodes. I'll see you next week for another episode, and thank you so much for leaving that one review, that one subscription, and sharing this with your friends.